And the bottom's the big difference to grind the coffee.
It's a labor of love.
Do a bit of chemistry. A scale is going to be really, really helpful. Way superior. Woo!
The nice thing about these two so far is they're fairly inexpensive.
And therefore how quickly the water's going to pass.
If you ever get a paper napkin,
Pulling those oils out, bleached or unbleached, and some say, oh, you definitely get unbleached, push it down and no matter how much you work out, it's not going to happen.
welcome to
Bean stuff.
Today on the podcast, we are talking about unplugged brewing. The only caveat I like to give is you may need to plug in an electric kettle.
Unless you have a fire.
Unless you have a fire, you go fully unplugged. But today we're going to go through some methods kind of inspired in some way, shape, or form, because a lot of us are now at home making coffee or maybe not going out as much. So just what are some easy kind of methods that are also going to give us good coffee results and something that we can try. And, maybe we've not heard of some of these and maybe we have heard of some. But Dad, I think there's kind of three important pieces that we need to kind of keep in our mind as we go through this. What are those?
Yeah, this is probably, if you're watching this podcast, you probably already know these things because they'll be important to you as well. But whenever you look at pour over, manual, this unplugged idea of brewing, French press, whatever it may be, you're going to have some certain things and remember to have them. One is you're going to have to grind the coffee. Burr is going to be better for grinding consistent size particles. But all the methods we look at today, you're going to need a grinder. Otherwise,
I would say that we do have that episode on grinding as well. Yep. So if there's any, if you want kind of a little bit deeper dive into that, there is, I would recommend going back to that episode.
Yeah. And you're going to need some patience too, because again, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably already over that one. Because it takes time. Whether if you're in an espresso machine, you certainly know this. But even with these different pour-over, different unplugged ideas, they take time. It's going to take around about 4 minutes, every one of them, at least. And then you're going to need to prepare. You're going to need to pour it. 10 minutes goes by, and you'll still be working at it in one sense. So it's not quick, but as we would say, it's worth it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a labor of love in that sense.
It is a labor, and I put that down as a technique. Each of them has their own technique and steps that probably do need to be followed. Some are more forgiving than others. Like a French press is a little forgiving with grind size and how long you do it. But some of the more fancy pour-over styles where you've got a hot water pouring on top of your coffee, it takes some technique to get the coffee going around, swirling the water, blooming. There's some things to go on. So you're going to need to do a bit of chemistry, slow down a little bit, and think through, what's the technique for this method?
There are some of these techniques, French press in particular, that will allow you to get a good cup of coffee from potentially a blade grinder or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
And as we're talking about different accessories, I know that there's some accessories that this is going to require, any of these processes. One is an electric kettle. And the other is obviously water.
Which is a topic in itself. You could we were away last weekend and the water from the tap was horrible. I was so thankful I'd bought a little plastic thing of filtered water.
So the other thing you're going to need is a scale.
Scale, I mean, you can get away without a scale, but I think if you want to be consistent and get the same quality coffee next time, a scale is going to be really, really helpful.
And I believe that's key, because if you want consistency, you're going to want to be able to monitor all aspects of that. I appreciate the podcasts and videos that James Hoffman does, and he's always very good with his testing and different things like that. And a scale is going to be crucial to replicating something that you like again, and making sure you get the consistency of your pour and amount and things like that.
It reminds me, there's so many variables, because you can get the right weight, but if you grind the wrong size, you're going to have to change the weight. And that's where the chemist technique comes in, because you will think about it and you will make some mistakes, and you'll have a lot of good coffee.
And I think another piece in tandem, I would say almost more important, but maybe that's arguable, is the timer. Because I think maybe those work in
Yes.
tandem because you're
Yeah.
looking for a certain volume over a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, things like French press, you may not necessarily need a scale. You might need a scale to weigh out the ground coffee, but not so much
Yeah.
the water if you're filling to the same point each time. But having that timer is also crucial. Being able to say, this is brewed for this long and pull it out, or, you know, press down on it, or finish pouring, things like that. And then last but not least, obviously some of these methods are going to require an additional filter, like a paper filter.
Like a paper filter. You're going to get, you can get metal filters. I'll tell you what this one's for shortly. But and my favorite filter of all, like the Abel Cone filter. So
You're an avid Abel Cone.
I must be.
Fan.
This is edition 3. I've had the other 2 editions too, but this is certainly, the scale is going to be really, really helpful. Way superior. Woo!
As we start talking about some of these different methods, the first one we're going to go into is the Hario V60.
It's a popular at our work. This is what they use all the time on the in the tasting room. A V60, and the V60 is not just a word made up. I believe it's the angle here is 60 degrees.
Interesting. So the angle between the base and the cone structure of
it's not 90 degrees. It would be straight up and down. It's 360. And I found when I was at work today, I was looking, bringing some of these things. You can get different types. You can get the stainless steel one, or this is the ceramic style one. Notice it's got, both of them have little what do you call those bits on the side there?
It's almost got I would say grooves that kind of go around in a spiral slowly down towards the center. And if anyone's ever seen a pour over before, obviously if you're watching, this is a little bit different, but if you're listening to the podcast, the Hario or the V60 has a kind of a star-shaped hole at the bottom, which is a lot larger than what you'd see typically in a pour over.
Yeah. And with it, of course, as we were saying, you're going to often need a filter. You will need one with a Hario. I have.
it'd be almost like chewy coffee if it was no filter.
Yes, I've even used, if when I'm missing my filter, I'd get some serviettes or something and you've got to get a number of them because they get so soggy it all goes through anyway. But
right.
This the good thing about this, the advantage of this one is that you're going to find consistency, delightful, clean flavor profile for this particular coffee. It's easy to do. But it's just clean coffee. If you want something with a little more body, a little more density involved in it, this probably won't be for you. But for an all-day cup of coffee, good.
And this might be a dumb question, but I'm curious if somebody was to ask you, so what's the difference? Is there a taste difference between a V60 and a pour over? If I make the same coffee those 2 different ways, am I actually going to taste the difference? Because for the uninitiated, it looks very similar.
And it is. When we get on to the next one, which is the Kalita Wave, they look very similar. And they do have similarities in taste, but this is that technique part. You'll find you can do things with a pour over, and the pour over part is, these all come under that umbrella of the topic. They're all pour overs. We pour over water.
That's true.
I mean, you can change them all up. You can do different extraction parameters, different temperatures, different grind size, water to ratio, the scale underneath. But they're all going to do slightly different. But the first 2, yes, I think you're right, Reed. They're going to be similar.
They're going to be similar, but there is going to be some difference. I mean, I guess I don't want to steal it away, but the Kalita Wave, how is that different?
Well, this is the only one I don't have, actually. So what did I do? I printed a picture of one.
And again, for anyone who's listening, it's okay that you don't have one. No one will know the difference.
It looks pretty similar to the Hario V60.
It's very similar, except with the V60, the lines go down in a spiral towards the bottom center. Whereas in the Kalita Wave, there are almost ribs, I guess you could call them, that go around the circumference of it.
Yep. And the bottom is the big difference. The bottom is, so the 3 holes in the Kalita, whereas this has got just one larger hole in there for the V60. Yeah. And that's what some would say is the big difference. It slows things down. It makes a cleaner cup, some would say. Some would say no, but you can get clean cup from this as well, but then this is going to let more through. So
there's an argument between both the Kalita and the V60 on like the cleanness of cup and
yeah. But both are going to be a medium fine grind. But It's that. And I should say with the the Kalita,
Uh-huh.
it has a flat bottom.
That's right. The Kalita does have that.
Yeah.
It has that flat bottom with the 3 holes in it.
Yeah. So that flat bottom means that the water, when you pour the water in over the coffee, it sits there for a longer amount of time. So extraction is going to be a little different in its timing for the Kalita Wave.
And the nice thing about, I mean, we'll talk about the others as well, but the nice thing about these two so far is they're fairly inexpensive. The next one to look at is the Chemex. And
Yes.
the Chemex is a little bit different as far as it's all self-contained in a way.
Well, it's true. The Chemex, and I've got a sort of a typical Chemex. This is not the typical Chemex has a wood sort of collar here. It goes around here. This is
Right. Instead, yours has that glass handle on the back of it.
And I like that, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But that's the Chemex. And the big thing with the Chemex, it also has a filter, but I think it's called a trifold filter. This one's just a straight a filter. With the Chemex one, you fold it like 3 different ways, and it's quite thick.
And I would say that the way I think about it, it's almost like I know if you go to a very fine dining restaurant, you get oftentimes a non-cloth napkin. But imagine with me, if you go to a really fancy restaurant and they give you a paper, if you ever get a paper napkin at a really fancy restaurant that's very thick, it's not the same, but it reminds me of that. It's a very thick paper, which I know we talked about in an episode about the Chemex, but that paper, it can pull out a lot of the oils in the coffee. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that you're right. And pulling those oils out, some people like that, some don't so much. So therefore, if you like it, go for a Chemex. If not, try a different style. And it's just the filter is so thick that it doesn't allow much to come through. It's just the coffee would have been sitting with water rather than the grounds and other things, and the fats in the body. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that Chemex again, you put that filter in that trifold filter. You put your coffee in, and you're also kind of pouring over. Not kind of. You are exactly pouring over the top of that. Yeah. And you're watching for a specific weight and extraction with how much water you add to. And again, that's in all these. That's where that scale and timer comes in.
Exactly. And the last two, that you had to do exactly the same. You had to have a scale, a timer to work out how long. And it's all up to you. But 3.5 minutes you're going to pour on top of the Chemex. It could be 4 minutes on another one. It all depends how finely you've ground the coffees, and therefore how quickly the water's going to pass through. Right. Water's going to go very soggy if it's like sand, because it's very thick and it just gets stuck in there. If you have rocks in the top of your pour over here, you have rocks in here, the water just goes through really quickly.
Right.
So it doesn't have time to suck out flavors that you want in the coffee.
Right. We also have an episode that I think we talked about earlier, but that extraction and talking about how grind size and timing makes a big difference in that.
You'll never get it right. There's never a perfect cup of coffee. You'll always think, I could do this better. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've got a question for you then. So with a lot of these, and there's a filter aspect to them, right? So all these 3 that we've talked about so far all have a paper filter involved. Yes. Are there alternatives to the paper filter for all 3 of these?
For all 3 of these, yes, there is actually. Metal, obviously. You can get gold ones, stainless steel ones.
And notably, that's going to change your flavor, because that paper, or not having that paper, doing the metal may not take out the oils as much, or it'll change a little bit of the way of how that coffee finally comes out into your cup.
Exactly. Even the paper ones, you can get different types of paper ones, obviously thicker and thinner. You can get bleached or unbleached, and some say, definitely get unbleached, organic. There's a whole lot of just the filters there is quite a thing. The thing about, because this sort of style looks quite impressive. In fact, I believe
the Chemex does have an elegance to it.
It does. I believe there's in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Guess what? They have a Chemex in there.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
And I know for a fact this is something you're excited about. Number 1, I think, what are you on, version 3 now? But the Able cone, right? Which is basically it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a cone that you put in the top of your Chemex. But what is I guess this is maybe getting a little sidetracked. But the version 3, what changed throughout these versions?
Well, different things happened. The first version, I believe, at the end here had a hole, and so the coffee and the water would come out of the filter around here as well as the hole. They decided version 2, it actually had a better taste when the hole was plugged up, so that it slowed the whole extraction process down as the water went through. Version 3, and you're right, Reed, I've tasted all 3, I've tested all 3, and version 3 in a blind test has come out really well for all the staff. I did all our staff, and they all said whatever that one is the one that tastes best.
It's good to know that there are alternatives, and I would say, you know, another benefit potentially is that you don't have to go out and buy filters. Also, there's the sustainability aspect of that, but there's, for pure selfishness, there's the aspect of you don't have to remember to go buy filters. It's always going to be reusable.
Eventually, it's less expensive. Oh yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And you know, the other side to that may be if you prefer the taste with a paper filter, then that's something to consider.
Yeah. Well, last thing I'm going to say, I know you tell me I get excited about these things, but also the nice thing about this one particularly, I don't know, they must have done some cooperation with them, but it fits really nice into the Technovorm, which is a plugged-in brewing system, one of the best you can get. But this fits in perfectly for that as well. So you can just take it in and out, whether you're going to do unplugged or plugged.
Near and dear to my heart is the French press.
Oh, yeah.
I think it reminds me of growing up with coffee. It reminds me of, I don't know, just good times and good coffee, but it's a really simple method. And it's similar to a lot of these metal filters. It's built in with the metal filter. There's no disposable pieces. You can make any amount. There's a lot of different sizes of French press, which is fantastic. Right.
Yeah.
I know that we both have a full size and then a small size. So it's, you know, for making coffee at home, I would say this is I guess the Chemex as well, but this is a good method to make multiple cups.
Very consistent and easy to do. If you're starting out on all this, I'd say this is probably the one you start with, actually, because it's just simple, hard to muck up.
Well, and like we said near the beginning, this one has a little bit of a lenience towards the grind consistency. So you could conceivably use just a off the shelf blade grinder, and you'd be able to get. I know, sorry, I don't mean to say those horrible words, but
can't believe you said that.
You can perceivably do that and get a really good coffee from that. So, what kind of grind are we looking for?
Well, this is, of all these methods, this one probably has the coarsest of grinds. So it's not opposite to espresso, which is the finest sand light. This one is quite coarse. Again, you could do a blade grinder, but having a burr grinder, setting it to very coarse is helpful again because those coarser bits are all the same size.
There's a consistency to that.
So your coffee you get a good cup of coffee. Next time, it'll probably be good again.
And that is the nice thing with a better grinder, you can kind of lock in that setting potentially for what you're looking for.
Yeah. By the way, this is when you grew up. You said this wasn't called a French press. I believe I think it was called a plunger. Just to let you know.
I will say, growing up, that plunging aspect, I do remember it's always exciting when mom and dad say, "Hey, it's time to plunge," and you can push it down. Although it's a little harder than it looks sometimes.
Yeah. This is the thing with French press. If you do, we say it's very forgiving, but if you do a little too fine, you won't be able to push it down. And I must admit, I've done this. I pushed it down, and the glass cracks.
The Aeropress.
Yeah,
you've got one there. Yeah,
I've got one here. The disadvantage is really just for one cup, so you can't do it for lots of people. The advantage is it's for one cup. And also, it's so small and light, you can take it camping. It makes a great thing to take that with you in your backpack or whatever. I would say, and we may have mentioned this when we've ever talked about the Aeropress before, it always talks about espresso, makes you a great espresso. I'd just like to add one word to that, espresso-like. There's no way you're going to get an espresso out of this.
No. And there are qualities, like when you think about the aspects of it, there's pressure being applied to that, but the pressure that you're applying to the Aeropress is nothing compared to what, you're not going to get 9 bars of pressure out of this.
No matter how much you work out, it's not going to happen. It's one of all the ones we've mentioned, it's really the only one that has its own competition They even have it at the SCA, the Specialty Coffee Association, have a French, the Aeropress competition, and people, you can. We were not going to talk about that, but that's the normal way you're putting your coffee in here.
There's an inverted and a regular. I guess you're going to say way to make it.
Metal, or you can use paper, whatever you prefer. But it goes in. But you're right, and that's. Oops, get this around the right way here. Coffee goes in there, water goes in there, and you, as you say, you can invert it on top of your cup like this, so water doesn't touch it, or you can invert it, whatever. The nice thing about these, though, with whatever filter you have, there's so many ways you can tweak these. There's recipes out there that you could spend a long time working out which was your recipe.
What's the last one on the docket here?
I thought this has been around for a long time. You can find these often, although I haven't found one for a while. At a
I know that before we did this episode, you said that you were going to try and find one.
Oh, I thought I'd have one within a day, but I'm afraid we haven't found one. But this is the Moka Pot, Moka.
And some others might know it as like cowboy coffee. Would that be correct?
Yeah, you could call it a cowboy coffee. Some also call this one espresso as well. But once again, there's none of that pressure that you need for espresso and other things you need for espresso. It's again espresso-like. You can make a very strong cup of coffee with the Moka, but strong coffee doesn't equate to espresso. That's different. They're starting. I've seen a few new versions of the Moka Pot because inconsistency being a bit of a problem. Where the water, when it comes up, do you pull it off the heat, or do you let it boil? I would say you probably don't. But so there's a new one out, a new version of it. I don't think it's part of Moka Pot, but it looks exactly the same. But it's got pistons and all sorts of things to help with some of that inconsistency. But it's still not espresso, but some people love their Moka Pot. And again, like the French press, you get just one cup, or you can get a much larger one.
So the question I've got for you, we've gone through kind of the ones that we have here today. If you had to pick one to work with and live with for the next week, what would you go for if you had to stick to one method that we've talked about today,
I'm looking
just for a week?
You probably know what I'm going to do here.
I think I do. Oh, I know, just by hearing it. Chemex with the cone filter.
Yep. I mean, they're all good. I must admit, I've never got sick of a French press.
And, I know I said it earlier how much I like the French press. That would probably have to be my pick. And another aspect of this as well, especially if you're starting to do this from home, is good coffee. And we do have other episodes on that, obviously, as well. But that's a component of it. Like, you're not going to get the same, like if you get a pour over from your local coffee shop and then you do one at home, if your local coffee shop is using good coffee, you're also going to need to use that same quality of coffee. And we have an episode on how to get coffee from the grocery store, what to kind of look for. That's obviously, without that, we don't have any coffee, but an important aspect of the
those opening points were made about a grinder. I just assumed everyone knew, get fresh coffee. Don't grind it before you do this. Do grind it just before you start. But the fresh coffee is like, I don't know, like having gas petrol in your tank. If you don't have that,
you can have a Ferrari, but without any fuel, you're not really going anywhere.
And you want good fuel because there's bad fuel out there too.
Exactly. Well, that's what we have for today's episode. Obviously, there are more methods out there. If you end up using something that's different that you haven't heard on the episode, we would love to hear what you're using. If you disagree, let us know. We'd be really curious of your thoughts and opinions. But thank you so much for listening to this episode of Bean Stuff, and we look forward to chatting in the next one.